Everybody, I hope you're having a really good day so far. It's really beautiful here today in Norfolk. So we're here again. We're approaching auditor season, and we've got EleanorGreene speaking today. Year end, keeping your internal auditor happy. So how are you doing, Eleanor?
I'm all right. I was doing an interim yesterday and it's freezing cold outside, so I'm sitting inside. I've hopefully got a tea delivery coming soon, so don't freak if you see that. And I will also give advance warning that my cats have a tendency to crash into the side of the screen, but we've seen your cat a few times.
Yeah. So this has been a really popular event. We had over 200 people registered. We've currently got well over 100 actually attending here. So we're going to spend the next 60 minutes. Eleanor's going to give her an overview on how to make her happy, how to keep internal auditors happy. And I'm just going to give a little brief overview of Scribe, and then we'll go to questions and answers. So over to you, Eleanor. Thank you.
Cool. First thing I will say to everybody is there are 5 screens worth of people. Anyone who's heard me whiffling on about audit before knows that if you pop a question into the chat, I will make notes of them and try and answer them as we go along, because it also means if several of you have the same question, we can answer it once thoroughly rather than again and again. I will also be, as I go along, discussing a couple of links and so on. I will also put those into the chat so that you can see them rather than trying to keep up with me. I don't do a PowerPoint because, well, frankly, I'm too lazy to write one. So yeah, it's called Keeping the Internal Auditor Happy. I chat to lots of internal auditors because I'm involved with the Internal Audit Forum, where we've got 40 auditors who between us cover, I think it's nearly a third of the councils in the country. So this isn't just me, it's all of the auditors. We share the same views. And so I'm actually going to start right at the very beginning about record keeping. How should you keep your records to keep your internal auditor happy? And rule 1 is tidily, please. When we are given a file and nothing has been hole punched and clipped in, and pick it up and everything scatters over the floor, we weep. So please make sure that everything is either in plastic wallets or hole punched and in one coherent thing. Date order newest on top. It's such an obvious thing, but it means that when you open the file, you know where it's up to. It also means if you're putting the newest on the bottom, you're constantly wrecking the older ones by going to the back of the file all the time. So it's such an obvious thing. It applies to taxes, charities, everything. Tidily and newest on top. Labeled would be nice. I mean, I know it sounds blindingly obvious, but the amount of files I get that are labeled School PTA 1978, but turn out to be the Parish Council 2021, if you've got a row of files on the shelf and they're clearly labelled, you can find them quicker, your auditor can find them quicker, everyone can find them quicker. Filing systems. There are 2 approaches to filing systems, both of which are correct, so long as you follow everything that's gone before. Some councils file a whole year's worth of stuff in one lever arch. So you've got the minutes, the bank statements, the invoices, all of that in one lever arch. Other councils have topical files, a bank file, a minutes file, and so on. There is no right and wrong. You just need to make sure whichever one you have is tidy. I would also say that if you are using the category filing, then it's easier to bin all the invoices after 7 years. Whereas if you've got the year filing, then you have to strip out and make sure you keep your minutes and supporting payment listings when you can bin your VAT stuff after 3 years. But the main thing is keep it tidily. Also, archiving. Please don't feel you have to keep everything in your house. We all know the clerks who take over from someone who was a clerk for 20 years and literally get, 10 archive boxes of God knows what arriving. And bless them, most of the clerks leave it like that because they can't face looking at it. The SLCC has very clear archiving rules, but the simple principle is minutes you keep forever. Once you don't need to keep them yourself in the office because you don't need them around, send them to your county archives. Minutes in particular, they are legally required to take because they are a national document. So you don't have to keep all of that in your house. Bank statements, quite useful to keep. Payment listings, quite useful to keep. AGARs, pretty useful to keep. Purchase invoices, sales invoices more than 7-year-old, gone. Old planning permissions, they're not even confidential anymore. They can literally go in the recycling because they're all on the planning portal. So do keep your records compacted so that you can find stuff, because then when the auditor asks you for stuff, you can find it. So that's the main bit on record keeping. And if when the auditor arrives, you sort of point them at a random pile of paperwork, they're not going to be happy. I mean, my favorite clerk, I love her to bits. She's a librarian. I arrive and there is a row of files laid out along the table in the order of the AGAR form. Oh, it's bliss, absolute bliss. But not everybody has a big spare table. But the principle is, if you make it easy for people, think of teaching at school. Do teachers like people who write neatly, or do they like the ones who scribble everything out, write in pencil, cross through it? It's the same principle. Make it nicer to look at and you'll find everything. Also, on the Practitioner's Guide, Practitioner's Guide 2023, section 4, you can find the link. Actually, I'll pull up the link is on the NAUC website, but the Practitioner's Guide, section 4, has an audit checklist. Go through section 4, you can see what we're going to ask to see. If your auditor isn't asking to see those things, change your auditor. So that's the key bits about your records, is make sure, that's why we're doing this in February. You've got another 6 weeks to get your records looking beautiful before the auditors start rocking up. Communications, book a date. I admit, I've got every single one of my councils booked in. I am doing audits every single day from the 3rd of April to the 16th of June. Wish me luck. There you go. John's put the link up. Brilliant. So in the chat, you can see the link to the Practitioner's Guide. Open it up. It's a PDF, which means you can search for the terms you want, much easier than having it on paper like it used to be. I've also noticed we've got Carrie Pillow is also in the room. She, as well as clerking, is another auditor, so she'll be checking what I say. But certainly book your audit now, because a lot of auditors have already started nagging our clerks and have booked in. If you are in one of the areas that doesn't have a lot of auditors around, start checking now. If your previous internal auditor is still around, try and get them. It's always easier. There is no requirement to rotate internal auditors. Anyone who tells you there is, check the Practitioner's Guide. You will find that the NAO specifically said there is no requirement to rotate internal auditors. There are councils I'm auditing that I've audited since 2001. I see them 3 days a year. I'm still pretty independent from them. So yeah, try and get your audits booked in. On the Internal Audit Forum page, there is a website. There's a page called Directory of Internal Auditors. That's got a few, and we're getting more all the time. It doesn't include any of the calcs that provide internal audit service, but we're hoping to get some of the auditors who work for the calcs to join in and do independent audit as well. But please get your audit booked. If nothing else, you have to have an internal auditor appointed before the year end. So basically get an audit booked before the year end. All the bigger councils, I would hope most of the big ones have had an interim visit. By big, I'm talking over 400,000. My littlest councils, I do 3 or 4 in a day. My tiniest council has a cash book that runs to the grand sum total of 24 transactions for the year, and they still have to go through the whole process. So communication, pre-year end prep, I would recommend every single clerk, no matter how experienced, whose decision is it on the IA? No, it's council decision. Absolutely council decision. If it is not a minuted decision, since the epidemic, the internal audit's done it remotely. Yes, if the auditor thinks I don't like remote, it's a personal decision, but I like to go in and see if I'm being told the whole truth. And there is a council that I now audit who were audited remotely, and it turned out they didn't actually have a minute book. The remote auditor went from the website, didn't realise that those web minutes were never being signed and approved, which rather got the council in a pickle with some other issues. So remote audit, some people like it, I really don't, but it's entirely up to each auditor. But yes, the council as a full body corporate at a full council meeting can appoint the internal auditor. It is not up to the clerk. And there, as is fairly well known, there was a clerk who chose her own internal auditors, and after she came back out of prison, she stopped doing so. So, you know, yeah, only the council. So yeah, try and book it in. Go through section 5. The Internal Audit Forum worked with JPAG to rewrite section 5 last year, and pop the question on and then I'll answer it, Alison. So yeah, the section 5 is the guidance for clerks and RFOs. It goes through every single box on the whole of the AGAR, section 1, section 2, and so on, and explains what's meant to be in there and how it goes it. Then also go through section 4, which is the guidance for your internal auditor. Is your internal auditor working from section 4 of the practitioner's guide? If not, why not? Because how on earth can they sign the AGAR form if they haven't read and worked with section 4? If your internal auditor is not asking to see your minute book, they are not complying with the practitioner's guide. So please read through those. Timings. It's a really important one for where there are shortages of internal auditors. If you are using the same internal auditor as you used last year, they have, by definition, seen your records during this financial year. So it doesn't matter. Right, I'll answer that one in a second, Alison. It doesn't matter if you sign off the AGAR before the audit or after the audit. So if you have the same auditor as last year and your auditor can only come late, you can have signed off the AGAR beforehand so that you can hit the 30th of June, and they can come in even on the 29th of June, but you've already signed it. If you are changing internal auditor, and if you have a calc team, it's the same person signing the return, not the calc team, you have to do the AGAR sign off after the auditor's been. So if you are changing auditor, it is really important that your council meeting to approve the AGAR is after the auditor comes. If you've got the same auditor, it doesn't matter. So just that one. Right. Just very quickly picking up on Alison's questions. In auditor fees and expenses, they're self-employed. They shouldn't be charging you expenses. Audit fees, I personally base my audit fees around the external audit scales. Every auditor does their own thing. We're all self-employed, we're all rivals, we all steal clients off each other, including, well, if you look on the IAF website, there's Tim and I sitting smiling next to each other, and we steal client councils off each other all the time. So a small council with precept less than 30k, if it's less than 25k, you have no one else looking at your records. If you're not paying at least £100 for someone to come and do a professional job, you're not getting a professional job. If you're over 25k, so between 25 and 30, then of course you've got the external auditor looking at your records as well. So it depends. External auditors, do have a look at the SLCC website. Avon, Cornwall, Dorset and Hampshire have all changed external auditor this year. BDO are back. However, we don't know who the BDO team are because the old team left because they lost 5 years of work. The Internal Audit Forum, Tim and I are having a chat with BDO on, yes, in Wales, the external auditor looks at everything. Sorry. So BDO are back for Hampshire, Dorset, Avon and Cornwall. So if you are with them, make sure you talk to the new external auditors when they come through. Yeah, Wales has ditched the lighter touch. Well done, Wales. I think the audit exemptions are a recipe for disaster. I can guarantee you that the councils who are having problems are not on these screens. It's just a fact of life. Public interest reports. Do go to the SAAA website, and there is a tab called Public Interest Reports. They are interesting reading. The majority are for people who do not, they're for councils who have just not bothered to submit an AGAR, which again, a public interest report. However, there are some councils who are what I would best describe as a car crash. Is anybody here from Kirby Muxloe? Right, Kirby Muxloe are legendary. They have had qualified audits and public interest reports every year for the last 8 years. I don't quite know how they got themselves into that mess, but they have gotten into that mess, and it's depressing for me, because that means that poor councillor spending all of their time fighting legislation, not doing things for their public. And really what we're all about is doing things for the public. Practitioner's guide updates. Sorry, I will come on to questions in a minute, so I'm just sort of rattling through my hot topics. Practitioner's guide, very, very minor updates this year. The main one is that the question about the transparency code is being changed to relevant legislation, because the transparency code is compulsory for councils under 25,000. For councils between 25,000 and 200,000, it just doesn't exist. And for councils over 200,000, the transparency code is good practice. But the Freedom of Information publication scheme, sorry. The scheme, you are not complying with it by publishing the scheme. You are complying with it by publishing what's in the scheme. And the Freedom of Information Act is compulsory on every council, no matter how big or small, and whether in England or Wales. So look at the publication scheme and turn it into a list of links that actually publishes what's there. Because if you look at ICO rulings on parish councils, things that are in the publication scheme, the ICO can enforce at very short notice at very high cost. So please be aware that the model publication scheme is to be used, not looked at. So if you've put it on your website, turn it into links. It is non-negotiable. It's legislation like the transparency code. We don't know. It's a new set of SAAA contracts this year for the external auditors. I'm hoping to find out in the next few weeks whether, when the external auditors receive the exemption certificates, they're going to have a quick look at the website. Because if you haven't published, for example, the AGAR on your website, you are by definition lying on your exemption certificate because you haven't complied with the transparency code. So it will be interesting to see if they do have a look at that. And I think a lot of small councils are in for a rather nasty shock, which is also where I say, keep your internal auditor happy, get an internal auditor who will look at all of your stuff. The other one, we're hoping, as you know, the other practitioner's guide changes are tiny. There's a little bit of clarification about bank reconciliations. Hot topics. Are you all registered with the ICO? Because every single parish council should be. And it's a bit of a shock to me when I rock up at a new parish council and go, are you registered with the ICO because you hold the confidential electoral roll? And they go, whoops. So please make sure you're registered with the ICO. Civility and Respect Project. It sounds a bit wishy-washy, but it really, really isn't. All you need to do is turn on UK political news and see what is going on with the Dominic Raab investigations to see that bullying and a lack of civility and respect are the reason we have such a high turnover of civil servants right the way down to small parish clerks. Why do we have a 35% vacancy rate in parish councils and a 40% turnover rate of clerks? Civility and respect, clerks being civil to members and the public being civil to members and clerks, and members being civil to officers and the public. Please get your council to have a look at the Civility and Respect Pledge and consider signing it. This is being supported by NAUC and the SLCC. For them to agree on something is quite extraordinary, but this is too serious to ignore. It's also being supported by the Local Government Association. It's also being supported by the ADSO, Democratic Services Officers. So monitoring officers, when you have complaints, are going to start looking to see what your council's attitude to civility and respect is. If you have a council that is not working as a team with civility and respect, you're not going to get good outcomes for the public. And that's what really keeps an internal auditor happy. So that's my 25-minute rant, quite a common one. Were there any, did anybody have any questions they wanted to specifically cover?
Lauren?
Other.
Yeah, Lauren's got a
Hello,
question.
hi. Hi. Sorry, can I just confirm the amount of time that we've got to keep the documentation? So I've written down bank statements, AGAR, invoices. That was all 7 years, was it?
AGAR, I would generally just keep because it's such a key document.
Right.
Invoices and so on, it's the HM Revenue and Customs rules, so that's 7 years. If you're a SLCC member or a calc member, you should be able to get the document retention policy that has been agreed by SLCC and the calcs, and that should cover it. Yeah, I mean, somebody just saying they put the AGAR with the minutes effectively in perpetuity. I would, because then you've got your summary of accounts forever. And if you're thinking in terms of a historic record, some of the 1905 sets of minutes are gorgeous. Alison asking what are calcs? County associations, County Association of Local Councils, so Hampshire Association, Leicestershire Association, and so on. They won't be answering their phones this morning because they're all in a county officers forum meeting this morning. But yeah, so certainly if you think back to minutes as the permanent historic record of the council, it should be possible to go through a minute book in 20 years time and the paper one and understand what happened. If your minute book is not complete enough to show what happened, what you paid, who you paid to, what your accounts were, what you decided, you haven't kept the records for the community. And you know, we get fascinating ones where you get 105-year-old village hall. You can go back to the minute book from 1910 and understand what was decided. Are your minutes that good? So is it okay to keep digital records of sales and purposes? Oh yes, oh yes, I love PDFs. The revenue changed the rules a couple of years ago for tax purposes, and it's trickled across into everything. The law for the revenue is, can you generate an accurate image of the document? So therefore a PDF attached to your Scribe ledger. And of course, for me as an auditor, if I log into a council and I go into the electricity account and I can see all of the electricity bills in a row without having to scrabble through a big dusty filing cabinet, it's bliss. It's absolute bliss. And for really, really big councils, you know, my biggest council has 1.5 lever arches of purchase invoices a month. So they literally have 20 lever arches of purchase invoices a year, times 7 years. Getting rid of that, just think of the storage space they're freeing up. And even if you don't have it attached to the ledger, yeah, fantastic. Minutes books going back to before the council started. Just fascinating record. Make sure yours are that good. But yes, on invoices, only print what you have a reason to print. You know, don't go printing big detailed reports and filing them just to get dusty. If the auditor wants them, they'll come and print them themselves. Keep on paper what is useful to have on paper or legal to have on paper. But things like sales invoices, do you actually need to print them out? A previous clerk lost our minute books. Yeah, I mean, that's one of the reasons I say to archive stuff to send it to county archives every 6 years or so, because they will keep it. Can the IA access my Scribe account? Yes, you can make your internal auditor a read-only user of your Scribe. I'm logged into several. What about, there isn't a requirement to initial invoices. Never has been. Complete misnomer. There's never been a requirement to initial invoices. What has to be signed is the authorization for payment, which was the checks and is now the payment list. There is no requirement for members to initial invoices. If somebody can find it in the legislation, I'd love to see it, but trust me, I've read the legislation. Carrie's chuckling because we discussed this in some detail at an audit meeting. But no, there is absolutely no requirement. The things that councillors have to sign with a pen, real minutes, payment list, which should be part of the minutes, ideally the bank reconciliation, which should be part of the minutes to prove that they've seen it. Apart from that, not a lot. Do we need a payment list as well as the list on the agenda? If you make your payment list a part of your minutes and it gets signed off, there you go, it's done. I might not remember to pay invoices unless I print it. If you want to print it and use it for the payments and then store it digitally and get rid of it, there you go. I add finances and additional papers. They're not listed as individual items on the agenda or within minutes. The total sum is approved by the full council. How can you prove what you've paid for? How can you prove what you have paid for if you don't have the list of who you've paid? If the external auditor asks for proof of what you had paid to them, how can you comply with that? You have to list your payments. If you look in the transparency code, it says to list every payment over £100, not the total, every payment. If you're just giving the total, you've got no proof you've paid your wages. So no, sorry, that's not good enough. Our payment isn't signed, but there's an electronic on the internet banking. What happens if the internet's down? Sorry, you know, if we get a solar storm and there's no internet for a week, I have to, the law is the minute book. On the bank reconciliation, Para Councillor reports the meeting, they've checked it. Okay, one of the classic thefts was a clerk who had 2 sets of minute books, one of which she submitted to the PWRB, the other of which the council saw. She stole several £1 million, several years in prison, and that council had to be abolished. The councillors should be seeing the original bank statements, and the bank reconciliation should be a matter of public record. Why would you hide how much money the council's holding? Should the bank rec be approved at each bi-monthly meeting? If you only meet bi-monthly, then yes. But finance committee, so the finance committee authorises payments. So sorry, just picking up Amanda, separate listing on the website of everything over 100. Yeah, if it's already in your minutes, you don't need to do a double listing. So what Jenny's doing is nice. I like that. List of payments to be authorised, signed by the chair, and with the invoices, so the councillors can see the invoices, but you're not printing lots of copies out. But yeah, I mean, certainly if you're only minuting the total of your payments, you are not complying with the Local Government Act, because you cannot prove what you paid to anyone in your minute record. And we're thinking 20, 30 years down the line. You know, if you're going to prove how much you paid for the cricket pavilion in 40 years' time, can you do it? If you can't, you haven't complied with the Local Government Act. You have to think about your minutes. The minutes are the historic record of the council. And as we had a very interesting one, on the website every month, great, but it should also be in the signed minute file. I had a very interesting one with the council who had just updated their risk assessment and their asset register, and they were very grumpy at me for making them do it before the year end, but they did update the whole of the register, and a few weeks later they were burgled and their whole tool shed was cleaned out and then burned, and the insurance company handed the money over in 2 weeks because the risk assessment and the asset register were bang up to date. No, each invoice, so summary of payments which is signed, but each invoice signed. No, they do not have to sign the invoices. It's the payment listing that has to be signed. So if you think about a big town council paying off 90, 100 invoices a week, they're not going to sit. I mean, also, let's be honest, if the chairman is signing 100 invoices, is he actually looking at them, or is he chatting about the golf? Yeah. I mean, that's how frauds happen. Should the payments be on the agenda as appendix document? Well, the agenda pack should have everything you are going to decide on in it as a matter of public record 3 days before the meeting. So if you are going to decide on those payments, that should be in your agenda pack. Can links be used in the minutes? Links to what? A document? I mean, if it's not in the site, a link to what? Because it's got to be a physical document that goes into the minute book. If you don't have, if your website goes down, sorry, right, Linda asking what the finance risk assessment is. If you go to section, hang on, let me go to the right page of the PG. Sorry, pick up the right mouse. I've got 2 computers here. Finance risk assessment is in section 5. No, hang on. In section 5, it goes through what the risk assessment is, and on, I believe, the PKF website, and certainly if the BDO extranet comes back, there is a sample risk assessment, but it's basically looking at all of your risks to go through. Your risk to you're not setting a preset properly, your risk to not employing people properly, your risk of having shadow employees. So your auditors should be able to go through it. Should the bank statement be attached to the reconciliation? No, please don't. Please don't. If you look at your bank statement, you will discover it quite often. HSBC, I'm naming you, have the bank details of people who pay money in to your account. That's a GDPR fail. Do not let that document become public. So yeah, so the risk assessment. Yeah, so links in the minutes, links to what? The minutes have got to be standing alone. Asset register 10 years out of date. Oh, joy. Happy, joy. Right, rule number 1 is start with what you've got. Valuations, of course, will not change because fixed assets in parish councils are held at historic cost. So whatever the value of the building was in 1905 when it was built is still what it's valued at in the asset register. They don't get revalued. There is no depreciation, there is no revaluation. The other thing is, frankly, get your councillors to each take a copy of it, walk around the village, check and see what you've still got, see what they can remember. If possible, talk to ex-councillors, ask them what they've got. You can do quite a good put together of an asset register, but the main point is nothing will have changed in value if you still own it. Council leases community hall from the borough council for £1 a year. No, it's their asset, it's not your asset. If the borough council own it, it's theirs, not yours. It can't belong to both of you. So does the agenda pack need to be public? I would recommend so. I mean, the easiest on the website is there is a Adobe product on not an Adobe wrap, but they do have a really good product where you can stitch your whole agenda pack together into one PDF, which also means you've got one PDF to send to the councillors so they can't forget to read a document because it's locked into the PDF file. If you do send them a paper one, do put glitter in the middle to see if they've opened it. That has been done for real. But yeah, I mean, I would make it public because, again, as Carrie rightly said, the more transparent you are about what you're doing with the money you're taking from the public, the happier they will be. If you look at the feedback that came from the external auditors, the councils that have problems are the ones who go like this. Yeah, stand tall, be proud of what you do. I don't get the pay slip till the morning of the meeting. So the payments list is seen at the meeting. Well, there is an interesting point. If you actually read the legislation, it says payments to be made or made since the last meeting. Salaries are contractual and budgeted. There is no obligation to wait till the meeting to pay your wages. In fact, it would be a breach of your employment rights to not pay you in a timely manner. Do we have to state the clerk's salary in minutes? Right. If the clerk is the only employee, their salary is going to go on the AGAR. So it's public anyway. If the clerk is the only employee, chances are it's not their full employment. If there are many employees, you can put the total amount of the payroll on. And when there are many employees, more chances that it will be their whole salary. So, but yeah, I mean, if you are, if you're the only employee, your salary is a matter of public record, as are civil service pay grades, as are, you know, my brother was in the Navy. His salary to the penny was a matter of public record. If you work in the public sector, you kind of go with that a bit. Council should see the bank statements. Is that not making them public? Well, no, because you can get a councillor to look at them and sign them off, but the public don't need to see them. Valuation for insurance purposes. Yeah, it's a good idea for buildings every few years. This is our financial regs taken from the NAUC. Regular basis once a quarter. Yes, I mean, that's again segregation of duties. If you can get lots of councillors to sign off, if you can get different councillors to sign off, I try to get councillors in rotation to sign off the bank rec, because then even the ones whose eyes glaze over about finance stuff can do that. But yeah, it's a good idea to get all the councillors to have a look at the bank rec. What do I do if the purchase?
We've got a question from Denise as well.
Hang on, yes, Denise, sorry, your hand's up. Go on, fire away, and then I'll carry on reading the screen as well.
Yeah, sorry, I don't think I actually got an answer to my question, forgive me, but my point was that we have a finance committee that has delegated powers to pay the bills, which they do. I give them a list from Scribe, awaiting authority, they agree that, and then when I do the minutes, I do the full amount of what was paid for each of the different cash books that we have, and then that gets signed. And my question was, do I need to put the whole list on for starters? And the other one is, does that then need to go on the minutes for the full council? No, because the full council just gets a copy of the minutes. They get a copy of all the minutes of all the committees.
Yeah, if the finance committee minutes are properly recorded with the full list of payments, you don't need to do it all over again at full council. They can just sign off the committee minutes.
Fabulous.
Yeah, so you don't need to do it twice, but make sure it's done thoroughly once. So I'm just seeing Alison just asking about low value assets. If it's less than your insurance success, does it really need to be on the asset register? Insure things that you might ever claim for on bulk and so on. Always insure things like laptops. Can you redact personal info from PDF? Oh yes, you can redact personal information, but again, it's easier to just have clerk salaries. What do you do if purchase cost is lost and asset register? Guess. The technical parlance is you guess. You make a best estimate, because, you know, sadly, it's really, really tricky. If you've got a 20-year-old playground, well, frankly, its now value is nil and it needs replacing, but you guess. And it is accepted that by the external auditors, you could go back through 20 years of minutes. Councillors are quite good at doing that job. But yeah, you guess.
The reason I put that question in, Elliot, Eleanor, is I've had a few councils with trouble with this. The external auditors, we had one council with 64 benches, many of them were over 15 years old. They said just to put a nominal value of £1, so you're listing them on the asset register.
Fine. Yeah,
and I just wanted you to discuss it on here. No, so, I mean,
so yes, the community assets for £1 is a really important topic, because as a classic case in point, Town Parish Council in Hampshire own 200 metres of foreshore. It is valued at £1. That is 200 metres of seafront property near the Hamel Marina. You can imagine what that would be worth if it was ever valued at market price. So it stays at £1 because it cannot be sold. So community assets, yeah, if you've got old street furniture, just put it on at £1. Life's too short, because when you replace it, then you'll put it in at cost. Somebody asked about, I'll come on to Frida's one in a second. Somebody asked about a yellow book. I've got my new yellow book somewhere now. I can't even see where I've put it. If you're, right, this is Yellow Book 9. It predates the Localism Act. If yours is older than that, get a new one. You don't need to buy it every single time. I can't even think where I've put it. Oh, there it is. So this is 13. That's the latest one. Yes, it's £100, but it's really, really, really useful. And it's still got some lovely pithy comments in it about not doing verbatim speeches. Frida's just saying small non-registered land. Oh joy. Non-registered land is a nightmare. I would always recommend talking to one of the 2 expert legal solicitors on this, which are Roger Taylor of Wellers Headley or Ian Davison of Surrey Hills. They are the 2 solicitors who really, really understand parish council unregistered land. So always make sure that you're using an expert. 10th edition, 10th edition of the Yellow Book for doing Silca, I'll be quite honest, I would ask your Silca trainers. So if the bank statements have to be seen by the parish, no, because if the councillors are coming into the office, say, and signing off the bank statements, they're not being made public at a meeting. They can be at the meeting, but the main thing is don't put them on your website, because they can include the details of your
Yeah, I'm just on a Zoom. I'm trying to. No, I didn't mean to ring you.
No, that's all right. So can you get the Yellow Book on Amazon? No. Well, you can, but it's even more expensive. Get it through the SLCC or your calc, because then it's cheaper. Are there any other books I'd recommend for the new clerk? Practitioner's Guide. The Practitioner's Guide, basically, we are trying to use it update it every year to make it better and better and better and better. There you go. John's actually put the Amazon link up. Some councils refusing to pay for the Yellow Book. It is flipping expensive. But there was a fantastic thread on the SLCC recently where everyone was selling on their old copies. So anyone in a big town council buying 13, selling on their 10s and 11s. So ask around. If you're in the clerks Facebook group, which is only clerks, they don't let nice people like me in there. It's certainly, and actually we might put one onto the Scribe Facebook group as well. See if bigger councils who are buying new editions are willing to sell their old ones on for sort of 30-40 pounds, because, you know, that's number 6. It's ancient, but actually it's still really, really useful. So I would always, also, there is nothing more intimidating to a vexatious elector than seeing that sitting in front of the clerk at a meeting. So there you go. So Kate's got several old ones. I would strongly, if you're not willing to do it, oh, sorry, Frida, I am now deeply jealous, because Charles Arnold Baker was an absolute legend. I never actually met him, but yeah. So Yellow Book, incredibly useful. Practitioner's Guide, it's a free download from NELC or the SLCC. So definitely download that, annotate your copy. You can search it. It is updated every year when the I will put up, it's Ian Davison. Let me just quickly type Ian Davison, Surrey Hills, and Roger Taylor, who actually wrote the latest edition of the Yellow Book. So Roger and Ian Davison used to work together, and then Ian moved away and set a firm up. But actually it does mean we've got 2 firms, which is really, really, really cool. Oh, there you go. John's found old copies on eBay. He's a legend. So you can get it cheaper. But yes, and the Practitioner's Guide, if they take it down, when they do the new one, it is missing for about 40 seconds. If you spot the gap, you're doing well. So the Practitioner's Guide is always there. The chat groups, the 2 Facebook groups, the one that Scribe run and the one that's clerks only, SLCC forum, go to any calc training sessions you can, go to your SLCC branch meetings, ask people. There is literally a ton of information. If you ask. Jamie, you got your paw up. Oh, Jamie's got his hand up, but I can't.
Yeah, sorry. Hi, Eleanor. Right. Not so much of a question, really, just after your thoughts, everyone's thoughts, really. So historically, we've had chair and vice chairs of the committees. They perform a monthly audit, come into the offices. It's not just bank recs. One month could be expenditure, 1 month payroll. We've got a lot of new councillors now, and they're really starting to question sort of their independence and their competence of doing the task, and whether we should kind of review it and what their sort of scope of involvement in the future might be, and perhaps they involved in the planning of the IA activity. So I just wondered, what have you got experience of other councils doing similar things? Do they?
Yeah. A lot of the big town councils, particularly, you will get councillors coming in and checking stuff. Sorry, somebody's already bought that copy on eBay. You'll get at big councils, you will regularly get councillors coming in and doing a review. And if it's one of those jobs that a lot of councillors really don't want to do, so a few end up doing it. I do encourage rotation in financial checking, just because fresh pairs of eyes see things that, you know, a new councillor might have gone on a new code of conduct training at the Calc and come in with a whole load of new ideas. So do recommend that you go rotate round the council. But also it is the case that your internal auditor should be working independent of that from the practitioner's guide. Get all of your new councillors to read the practitioner's guide, have a look at what your current councillors are doing and see how it dovetails with the requirements, and maybe reset the remit for the internal, as in the councillor audit checks. Make it a positive learning development thing rather than picking a fight, and then everybody ends up happy, hopefully.
Oh, thank you. Yes, have a really good day. See you all later. Cheers. Bye-bye.